20 things from the 1970s you forgot you grew up with. Before everything went digital and disposable, life had its own quiet rhythm, and the little things we lived with told the story. In this video, we're looking back at 20 everyday treasures from the 1970s that you may have forgotten, but never really let go of. TV antenna foil. On quiet weekend mornings, the living room would come to life in the most humble of ways. Someone, often the youngest, always the most patient, would be sent to adjust the antenna. You didn't twist it, you studied it, squinted at the snowy screen, turned slowly, gently, like coaxing a memory back into focus. And when that picture began to sharpen, even slightly, someone would whisper from the couch, "Right there. Don't move." That's when the aluminum foil made its entrance. Not fancy, not factory-made, just a crinkled sheet from the kitchen drawer, given new purpose by necessity. Wrapped carefully around the rabbit ears, it clung to the antenna, not through science, but through faith earned from countless attempts. In many households, that sliver of foil remained untouched for ages, standing proudly atop the television set, a slender streak of silver, modest yet unwavering in its duty. We'd blame the wind or the neighbor's lawnmower if the picture went fuzzy again, but we never questioned the foil. Those brief stretches of time gathered around the television had little to do with getting a clear picture. What truly mattered was the closeness. Shoulders nearly touching, voices hushed, everyone focused on that glowing screen, sharing something unspoken yet understood. A shared silence, a held breath, and the comfort of knowing that, for a little while, everything was working as it should. Woolworth's lunch counters. How did a 5 and dime become the heartbeat of so many childhoods? Not for the bargains on school supplies or buttons, but for that long counter in the middle of it all, lined with spinning stools, warm plates, and familiar faces. You'd climb up, feet dangling, elbows on formica, waiting patiently as the clatter of dishes and soft hum of conversation filled the space. The cook turned grilled cheese sandwiches with steady hands, while the aroma of sizzling bacon moved through the aisles, carrying the unspoken assurance of something worth waiting for. Woolworth's lunch counter wasn't a place to eat. It was a pause in the day, a quiet in-between. You might have taken the seat next to your mother, her purse nestled beneath one elbow, or split a malted shake with your sibling after counting out quarters from your pocket. The waitress often used a sweet nickname and never forgot the way you ordered your fries. And that scoop of ice cream, if you were lucky, came in a chilled glass dish and made everything else fade away. Time moved slowly there. Strangers talked like neighbors. Kids made memories without realizing they would last. And while the storefronts have closed and the chrome has dulled, the feeling of belonging in that little corner of the store still lingers, soft as a folded napkin, clear as the first bite of something made right. Burnt orange Tupperware. Nearly every household had one, a burnt orange container that managed to outlast blenders, cookbooks, and entire eras. It didn't arrive in packaging or with instructions. One day it simply took its place among the dishes, and from then on, it stayed put. The lid always sat slightly crooked, warped from repeated yanks and years of use. But that didn't stop anyone from reaching for it. Sometimes you'd find it in the fridge holding meatloaf, other times on the counter with cookies that were meant to last the week, but never did. On rare occasions, it turned up in the garage, full of screws, marbles, or things nobody had the heart to throw away. That container wasn't beautiful, but it was dependable. It stuck around through packed lunches, leftovers, and kitchen reorganizations that never quite reached the bottom drawer. Opening it was its own kind of ceremony. 2 hands braced, a little twist, a hopeful pull, and that soft snap when the seal finally gave in. And when the lid disappeared, the bottom stayed useful, or vice versa. Somehow, it always found a purpose. And in a world where so much changed, that orange Tupperware never really did. plastic couch covers. In those houses where plastic couch covers reigned, childhood moved a little more carefully. You stepped lightly into the living room, aware that relaxation took a back seat to protection. The couch underneath that covering appeared untouched, immaculate, flawless, as though no one had ever settled into it. The instant you sat, the vinyl clamped to your legs, crackled beneath you, and held fast in a way that made brief stays nearly impossible to forget. The heat trapped between you and that protective layer was relentless. Summers were the worst. Your thighs practically welded to the cushions, your back damp within seconds. Yet no one ever questioned it. Grandma swore by those covers. She'd run her hand across the surface and say, "Still looks good, doesn't it?" As if the fabric underneath was too precious to breathe on. We didn't argue. We just smiled, peeled ourselves off when it was time to leave, and carried the moment with us. Years rolled on. The couch faded from sight, but the texture against your skin, the heat it trapped, and the rustle of vinyl under movement continue to echo within. Isn't it funny how the things we once complained about are now the ones we miss the most? Which of these 1970s memories brought you right back to your childhood? Paper road maps. What was it about spreading out a creased map across your lap that brought the front seat to life? Inside the glove box, beneath the rattle of loose coins and stray receipts, lay a soft-edged bundle, creased and worn, but always dependable. Pulling it open across your knees turned the front seat into a navigator's post. Routes fanned across the sheet in every possible path, blue lines marking highways, bold red strokes charting the interstates, and names of cities scattered throughout the page, each one standing by with its own promise. The map crackled with every adjustment. Sunlight hit the glossy folds, and your fingers moved along towns you'd passed or hoped to reach. It was rarely exact. Roads closed, detours popped up, but that only added to the ride. You might have taken a wrong turn, ended up near a grain silo you'd never seen, and kept going anyway. That was part of it. Inked circles, coffee blots, scribbled notes, they all stayed there, long after the trip had ended. Each stretch of highway inked on the page marked more than a path forward. It held the weight of detours taken, turns retraced, and the quiet victories found in charting a course through the unknown. TV Sign-Off Anthem. When the screen faded to black and the flag waved one final time, it wasn't a television signing off. It was the entire day drawing its curtain. The sound of the national anthem rising from the speaker marked something more than routine. It was the quiet cue for children to stop pretending they weren't tired, for parents to begin switching off lamps and straightening cushions. No countdowns, no autoplay, no next episode. Then came the static, a soft, steady hum that filled the house with a strange kind of comfort. That snowy screen, flickering in grayscale, became the last thing many kids saw before drifting to sleep on the carpet. It wasn't unusual to wake up hours later to that familiar buzz, the room dark except for the faint glow of the forgotten screen. Back then, technology didn't chase you through the night. It paused. It gave you space. The anthem didn't close a program. It closed the day. As the flag moved across the screen and the anthem dwindled to a hush, the air shifted, as though an entire nation lowered its voice together to offer a parting phrase. Good night. We'll see you tomorrow. Metal ice cube trays. The old metal ice tray didn't sit in the freezer. It ruled it. Solid, cold to the touch, and unmistakably heavy, that tray was a test of patience and perseverance. Lifting the lever required grit, and more often than not, left your fingers red from the cold. The mechanism was simple, but unforgiving. A forceful tug could send the lever flying into your knuckles. Too gentle, and the ice remained stuck, unmoved and stubborn in its frosty grip. They didn't slide out neatly. They cracked, clung, split in half, or shot across the counter like glassy marbles. Yet, there was a strange rhythm to the ritual. The metallic creak, the sudden snap, and finally the unmistakable plink of ice falling into a waiting glass. That metallic snap meant more than a cold drink. It announced a treat on the way, a fizzy cola, tangy lemonade during the heat, or root beer poured with care when visitors stopped by. Modern freezers might be more efficient, but they lack the drama. Back then, one tray could turn a simple drink into a small triumph. And regardless of how much resistance they gave, the clink of those cubes dropping into a glass marked the end of a small effort with a well-deserved payoff. Drive-through bank tubes. What's the first piece of space-age technology you ever got to operate from the backseat of a car? For a lot of kids in the 1970s, it wasn't a video game or toy. It was the pneumatic bank tube. Settling into the front seat as the car eased into the drive-through lane gave the impression of preparing for takeoff. A sleek silver canister waited overhead, humming faintly inside a clear chute. You'd watch with fascination as your mom scribbled on a deposit slip, sealed it inside, and handed it over. With one firm motion, the canister shot upward through the clear chute, disappearing in an instant, as if the machine had launched it straight into tomorrow. On the other end, through thick glass, a teller responded from behind a slightly wavy window. Then came the return, faster than expected and packed with treasures. A receipt, some crisp change, and a striped lollipop nestled inside. To a child, this wasn't a routine stop. It offered a sudden peek into a world where transactions came with a dash of curiosity and the unexpected. Today's mobile apps can't compete with that thrill, not when you once believed your money flew through the sky on a secret mission. 8-track tapes. Music used to come packaged in chunky plastic cartridges that rattled around in glove compartments and dashboard slots. The 8-track tape wasn't a music format, it was part of the ride. You'd slide one in, hear that satisfying click, and let the music roll without worrying about flipping anything over. It played in loops, shifting between programs with a faint clunk, as if the machine itself had to pause to catch its breath. Cars rolled down highways with stacks of these tapes on the dash. The Eagles, Fleetwood Mac, maybe some Conway Twitty, all sun-faded and cracked at the edges, and tucked between them, a little converter that let you sneak in a cassette tape when the 8-track started losing ground. That simple plastic adapter once stood as a glimpse into the future. No displays, no swipe features, just a slot, a switch, and miles waiting beyond the windshield. Though it eventually faded, the 8-track carried with it a kind of freedom. Songs flowing endlessly, no interruptions, no skipping. It didn't play music. It became part of the background hum of everyday life. And, in a way, didn't it help shape how we listen even now? Hands off, seamless, always rolling forward. Landline phones. In the corner of nearly every home, a sturdy phone once sat with quiet dignity, anchored to the wall or cradled on a side table, waiting for a ring that could bring news, laughter, or a familiar voice. The rotary dial moved with a satisfying rhythm, each number clicking back with purpose. Calls weren't made in passing. They were occasions. You stood still or leaned into the receiver, coiled cord wrapped around your hand, your voice traveling through miles of copper lines. Sometimes, numbers began with letters, Meadowbrook, Cherry, as if your neighborhood lived in the digits. A call could stretch across rooms or hours. Conversations were full, unhurried. You scribbled down names on a pad nearby, often next to the family calendar or grocery list. Hanging up meant setting the receiver back into its cradle, or in moments of teenage frustration or family tension, letting it drop with emphasis. That impact became one of the everyday background noises of the house. As years passed, the familiar ring faded, replaced by digital tones and glowing notifications. Yet the heft of that handset and the voices once heard through it stay with us. And perhaps what we long for most is that short breath before anyone said a word. Love this kind of trip down memory lane? Hit like and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Fruit stripe, gum. The kitchen counter often held treasures not found in any candy aisle today. Among the contents on the counter, a pack of fruit stripe gum always drew attention, not due to how long the taste held, but thanks to its bold stripes and over-the-top charm. As soon as a piece was unwrapped, an overwhelming wave of sugary intensity surged forward, so exaggerated it bordered on unbelievable. That first chew was electric. Seconds later, though, it gave up entirely, leaving behind a stretch of bland rubber. The flavor never carried much weight. What captured attention were the vivid wrappers, each one a flash of neon, often hiding a temporary tattoo ready to transfer with the help of a wet napkin. The zebras, clad in vibrant stripes and caught mid-leap or gliding across the packaging, gave the entire package a kind of animated energy. Kids traded wrappers, compared flavor packs, and competed over who could chew the most at once. You kept unwrapping stick after stick, chasing that initial burst all over again. Though the flavor vanished quickly, your hand returned to the pack without a second thought. Fruit stripe wasn't meant to stay with you. It was about the burst, the thrill, and the color it added to an otherwise ordinary afternoon. Saturday morning PSAs. Did a cartoon character shaped like a wedge of cheese ever teach you something important between commercials? That's how nutrition, safety, and responsibility found their way into American homes, woven between Saturday cartoons, not through lectures, but through jingles. Just as the fun was peaking with the Flintstones or Scooby-Doo, everything would pause, and in came a bright-eyed blob with big ideas and a bigger message. These short PSAs, public service announcements, weren't flashy, but they made their point. Whether it was time for timer, reminding kids to eat a balanced snack, or a bizarre cowboy warning not to drown your food in sauce. The delivery was loud, catchy, and oddly compelling. You'd stop chewing your cereal to process the chaos on screen, somewhere between laughter and confusion. The drawings appeared hastily done, and the verses sometimes missed the mark, yet the takeaway often stayed with you. Those catchy tunes had a way of embedding themselves where they were least expected. And now, years later, they come flooding back at the most unexpected times, proof that those clunky animations and offbeat songs left behind more than noise. They left echoes. Emergency broadcast system tests. The screen snapped to a new image, colors vanished, and a shrill alert carved through the space as if the air itself had turned against you. At that point, no animated character could shield you from the weight of what came next. It was the emergency broadcast system, crashing into your living room without permission or mercy. A chilling buzz, then a voice, mechanical, steady, declaring it was only a test. But instincts rarely listen to logic. Hands froze mid-air, cereal spoons hovering. Kids glanced toward their parents, searching for steadiness, but the adults didn't have answers either, only uneasy stares toward the television, hoping life remained steady beyond the walls. The alert didn't need volume. It reached through the skin. Reassurance often came, but the pause that followed stayed longer than anyone expected. No one ever clarified why it had to strike that way, or why it carried such weight. But for those raised in that stretch of time, that broadcast became as routine as cartoons or the evening news. Nowadays, alerts buzz on phones with polite vibrations, but none have the raw, unsettling power of that broadcast's abrupt arrival. It was fear, broadcast by design. Iron-on patches. How many of us wore our childhood on our jeans? A rip across the knee wasn't the end of a pair of pants. It was an invitation to create something new. In kitchens throughout the country, irons steamed against layered towels, while mothers dug into cookie tins and sewing kits for vibrant patches. Peace symbols, arcs of color, and animated mascots didn't serve as trim. They made a statement. Your pants didn't say where you'd been. They told the world who you were becoming. Each patch carried a little chapter of a bigger story. One might have come from a summer fair, another traded at school or peeled off an old tee. And when a favorite shirt wore thin, its most cherished pieces continued the journey, fused onto denim with intention and the heat of an iron. Jackets grew heavier with each edition, backpacks became mobile galleries, and playgrounds sparkled with threadwork stitched by hand or scorched into place by irons that ran hotter than anyone expected. You didn't replace things, you revived them. In that era, style wasn't about trends. It spoke of care, resourcefulness, and the satisfaction found in turning the faded into something distinct once more. Reel-to-reel players. In the glow of amber lamplight, deep within the quiet corners of a family den, a gentle whir of spinning reels often signaled the start of something special. Reel-to-reel players stood proudly on the shelf, substantial, deliberate, and built to impress both the eye and the ear. Their twin reels spun with a steady grace, feeding magnetic tape through a maze of polished rollers, producing music that felt alive in the room. Fathers approached them with precision, guiding the tape along its path methodically, activating each control as though initiating something far greater than playback. Jazz, folk, and early rock echoed through wood-paneled walls with a clarity that stood apart from the hiss of later cassettes. The music wasn't heard, it surrounded you. A perfectly placed Miles Davis note or a soaring guitar from Santana could bring stillness to a room. Children, meanwhile, stayed close but kept their distance, eyes locked on the spinning reels, as though tracking the passage of something greater than tape. Labels in faded Sharpie held hidden treasures, each spool a soundtrack to a chapter of adult life we hadn't yet lived. Those machines weren't tools. They were timekeepers for the vinyl generation. What's one thing from the 70s we didn't include that deserves a spot in the next video? Let us know in the comments. Cigarette machines. Near the clatter of silverware and the soft glow of jukebox lights, there once stood a vending machine made entirely of brushed chrome and quiet authority. Its glass panel revealed neatly arranged cigarette packs, standing at attention behind sleek chrome levers, each positioned for a firm, deliberate action. You didn't need a card, coins from your pocket, and a firm tug. The machine would answer with a heavy clunk, offering a pack that landed neatly in the tray below. These machines lived beside salad bars, next to coat racks, sometimes only steps from family booths. While adults lit up after pie and coffee, kids stirred their root beer, barely noticing the smoke drifting toward the ceiling. Nobody called it strange. It simply belonged, part of the scenery, alongside sugar dispensers, ketchup bottles, and laminated menus. As regulations tightened, the machines disappeared, rolled out discreetly, treated no differently than outmoded fixtures. These days, their presence is mostly limited to vintage stores or collectors' corners, but those who reached into one and heard the mechanical drop will never forget the odd comfort of knowing exactly what came next, without needing permission. Bolted desks. When the bell rang and chairs scraped in every direction, one thing never moved an inch: your desk. Those old classroom setups weren't designed for comfort or flexibility. They were anchored into the floor with metal legs that seemed welded to the very structure of the school itself. The seat didn't swivel or slide. It groaned under shifting weight and left barely enough space to cross your legs, if you dared. Everything about it was heavy, from the wooden writing surface scarred with initials and tic-tac-toe boards to the wire basket underneath crammed with books, torn folders, and the occasional lost pencil that never rolled far. You'd slide your fingers beneath the edge and come across a layer of old gum, flattened by time, hardened into place, its story lost to the past. Passing a note meant creativity, either a stealthy stretch across rows or a perfectly timed drop during a textbook shuffle. Despite the discomfort, that desk held your entire school year together. It was a canvas for idle thoughts, a stronghold during pop quizzes, and a witness to every daydream. One desk, one spot, and somehow you made it yours. Smelly school pencils. Who knew a simple pencil could carry a story no textbook ever told? Nestled in your pencil box beside worn erasers and bent rulers was always that one, the one with the glossy finish and an unmistakable scent. It wasn't cedar shavings or fresh paint, but something stranger, harder to place. Almost industrial, slightly sweet, and impossible to forget. You'd sneak a quick sniff when the teacher turned away, curious if that peculiar scent had managed to hold on. It sparked theories whispered across rows of desks. Was it the lacquer, the graphite, or the factory air trapped inside? Everyone had a guess, but no one knew for sure. If yours had the strong scent, you guarded it. Letting someone else borrow it risked bite marks, split wood, or worse, disappearance. It often stayed untouched in the desk, held aside as if its purpose went beyond routine assignments. Today's pencils wear pastel jackets and motivational quotes. They're cheerful, safe, predictable. Yet those earlier versions, marked by their unusual scent and subtle draw, had a way of transforming basic arithmetic into something unexpectedly captivating. It's strange how the tiniest details can carry so much from the past. Clackers Toy. Hands gripping the string, eyes locked on the blur of motion. Clackers turned ordinary afternoons into trials of nerve and timing. Every swing sent those acrylic balls colliding with a crisp crack, bouncing their noise through playgrounds and across lawns. Nailing the cadence earned cheers from nearby kids. Missing the beat often meant a sting across the knuckle or an unexpected hit to the cheek. The marks left behind weren't hidden. They were worn proudly. The toys came in bold, swirling colors, some with glitter, others clear as marbles, each one catching sunlight in its own wild way. Getting them to click above and below your hand without losing control took practice, determination, and sometimes a bit of pain. Yet that never stopped anyone. Clackers spread fast, from schoolyards to bus stops, creating symphonies of chaos wherever they landed. Adults called them dangerous. Schools banned them. But kids kept playing, chasing that perfect cadence that came when the arcs aligned right. No electronics required, just timing, determination, and a refusal to quit after the sting. In those seconds, it wasn't a toy in motion. It was gravity being challenged, one swing at a time. Calculator watches. A child wearing a calculator watch didn't tell time. They told the world they were ready for anything. Its glowing digits and clustered black buttons gave it presence, perched on the wrist as a quiet signal of precision and purpose. Those who wore one weren't keeping track of minutes. They were solving equations at lunch, calculating baseball averages on the bleachers, or impressing friends with fast math during bus rides. That little gadget, fresh out of the packaging, promised the future in every click. And for a while, it delivered. It turned heads in the cafeteria and sparked envy in the library line. But in classrooms, things changed quickly. Teachers noticed fingers tapping during tests. Friends started using it more to pass notes than calculate. Soon enough, policies shifted, and the watch's status slipped from cutting edge to contraband. It stayed behind, resting in drawers, perched on nightstands, a trace of a world where technology felt both accessible and extraordinary. Often earned through birthday wishes or weeks of household tasks, it displayed more than digits. It stood for effort, ownership, and a milestone in a child's passage through the early age of electronics. The battery might have weakened, the buttons may have stiffened, but its presence marked a generation stepping into the digital age. If you grew up in the 1980s, you remember this. What if you could step back to a time when everything just felt different? The laughter was louder, the days seemed longer, and the little things meant everything. If you grew up in the 1980s, those memories still live somewhere deep inside you. Let's dust them off, one unforgettable moment at a time. Blockbuster. There was a certain magic in the air when Friday evening rolled around. For millions of American families in the late 1980s, it meant one thing: heading to Blockbuster. The glow of those blue and yellow signs felt like a beacon, calling everyone in for a shared adventure. Inside, the aisles seemed endless, each VHS cover a window into a different world. Action, comedy, animation, suspense. Choosing the perfect movie wasn't just a task, it was a treasured ritual. Parents debated titles, kids begged for their favorites, and friends wandered the shelves, clutching armfuls of tapes. The experience was about more than just watching something. It was about the thrill of the hunt, the joy of discovering, and the promise of a weekend wrapped in laughter and popcorn. For many, it was the centerpiece of family bonding, and those trips became some of the most lasting memories of a generation raised on rewind buttons, late fees, and the unmistakable scent of buttery nostalgia. The arcade. They say you could hear it before you saw it. The rapid-fire blips, the crash of pixels colliding, and the occasional cheer from a kid who just made the leaderboard. In the 1980s, arcades were more than a place to play. They were a world of color and chaos tucked inside strip malls and shopping centers across America. Packed wall-to-wall with games like Pac-Man, Space Invaders, and Donkey Kong, these neon-lit sanctuaries pulled kids in like magnets, one quarter at a time. The goal? Beat your friend's high score, impress someone cute, or just escape into 8-bit glory for an hour or two. You didn't need Wi-Fi, just quick reflexes, a pocket full of coins, and maybe a slushie in hand. And even if you didn't win, you still walked out with sticky fingers, sore thumbs, and that unshakable sense that you'd been somewhere electric, somewhere special. That was the magic of the arcade. The Oregon Trail. Ever try to cross a river with an ox, a broken axle, and half your party sick with cholera, all before lunch? If you went to elementary school in the 1980s, chances are the Oregon Trail wasn't just a game, it was a rite of passage. What began as a teaching tool in Minnesota classrooms morphed into one of the most beloved computer experiences of a generation. With its pixelated graphics and clunky green-on-black text, the game put kids in charge of a pioneer wagon heading west, where they'd learn, often the hard way, about starvation, snake bites, and the ever-dreaded dysentery. But here's the thing. It worked. You absorbed history without even realizing it. And when the teacher wheeled that beige Apple II into the room, it was like striking gold. Suddenly, multiplication drills gave way to hunting buffalo and rationing food for your family of 5. In between laughs over lost cattle and tragic river crossings, you were actually learning about life in the 1800s. And for a game with zero internet, it brought a whole lot of kids together. Cabbage Patch Kids. In the winter of 1983, toy aisles across America turned into battlegrounds of love, longing, and pure chaos. That was the year the Cabbage Patch Kids captured the hearts of millions and sparked one of the most frenzied shopping seasons in retail history. Soft-faced and uniquely hand-stitched, each doll arrived with its own birth certificate and adoption papers, making children feel like proud parents rather than mere owners. Created by Xavier Roberts and mass-produced by Coleco starting in 1982, these dolls weren't just toys. They were tiny, wide-eyed companions with names, personalities, and a magical origin story that began in a cabbage patch. By Christmas of '83, the craze had reached a fever pitch. Stores were mobbed. News crews captured parents elbowing for a chance to bring one home. Yet beneath the frenzy was something tender. The joy of giving a child a friend they believed had been waiting just for them. Today, those dolls rest on attic shelves or inside memory boxes, their yarn hair slightly faded. But the love they carried remains untouched. What's the very first memory that comes to your mind when you think of growing up in the 80s? Let us know in the comments below. Hulk Hogan and Macho Man. The roar of the crowd, the flashing lights, the pounding entrance music. It wasn't just wrestling, it was theater on fire. In the 1980s, professional wrestling exploded into the mainstream, and leading the charge were two of its most electrifying icons, Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage. Hogan, with his towering frame and signature red and yellow gear, brought an almost superhero-like presence to the ring. "Say your prayers, eat your vitamins" wasn't just a catchphrase, it was a movement. Kids wore the headbands. They flexed their biceps. They believed. Meanwhile, Savage brought an entirely different kind of magic. Draped in sequins and sunglasses, with that gravelly, "ooh yeah," echoing across arenas, he mixed intensity with unpredictability. And standing by his side, Miss Elizabeth added a grace and drama rarely seen in sports entertainment. Together, the two men formed the Mega Powers, a team so larger than life it felt like a comic book come alive, until their friendship imploded in a storyline that gripped millions. Hogan and Savage didn't just define an era. They were the era, symbols of energy, excess, and the raw emotion that made 1980s wrestling unforgettable. What did growing up in the 80s teach you that still sticks with you today? Garbage pail kids. Can you still hear the crinkly sound of that waxy wrapper being peeled open? Not for the gum, because let's face it, that stuff could crack a molar, but for the glorious, grotesque brilliance inside. In the mid-1980s, garbage pail kids crashed into playgrounds across America like a pie to the face of polite childhood. Dreamed up by Art Spiegelman and Mark Newgarden, with wild artwork from John Pound, these trading cards took sweet-faced Cabbage Patch dolls and turned them into snot-dripping, head-exploding weirdos with names like Atom Bomb and Leaky Lindsay. They were crude, clever, and kind of perfect. For kids who found Barbie too boring and baseball cards too bland, these rebellious little misfits were pure gold. But not everyone was laughing. Parents complained, schools banned them, and the makers of Cabbage Patch Kids sued. Still, between 1985 and 1988, 15 series hit the shelves, and Garbage Pail Kids became a full-blown phenomenon. There was even a disastrous movie and a banned cartoon series. But none of that mattered. Because at recess, if you had a full set of Series 3, you weren't just cool, you were legendary. Music scene. Fog machines hissed across neon-lit stages, spotlights sliced through the dark like lasers, and guitars wailed high into the night. It was the golden age of hair bands, and everything about it was bigger, louder, and unapologetically dramatic. Bands like Mötley Crüe, Poison, and Bon Jovi didn't just perform, they erupted into arenas with teased hair, leather pants, and eyeliner thicker than their bass lines. Meanwhile, on the other end of the cultural spectrum, a different sound was rising. In basements, schoolyards, and city blocks, hip-hop was building its foundation. Run DMC traded in spandex for Adidas, LL Cool J rhymed with fire in his voice, and Public Enemy made music that punched with political urgency. While hair metal celebrated fantasy, decadence, and escape, hip-hop spoke directly to reality, gritty, unfiltered, and proud. One genre lived in the glow of glam, the other thrived in the pulse of the streets. But together, they reflected the dual heartbeat of the 1980s. Theatrical, rebellious, deeply expressive. Whether you screamed lyrics from a stadium seat or bounced your head to a boombox beat. This music became the soundtrack to youth in full volume. Popular ad slogans. Before social media hashtags and viral TikToks, we had something even stickier, slogans that burrowed into your brain and refused to leave. The 1980s were a golden age of advertising charm and chic, when commercials weren't just selling soap or snacks, they were selling attitude. Wendy's didn't just want to flip burgers, they asked the nation, "Where's the beef?" A line that hit so hard it even ended up on the campaign trail. Dunkin' had Fred the baker trudging into work at dawn, muttering, "Time to make the donuts." And suddenly, America had a new anthem for being tired but responsible. Over in Pizza Land, Domino's promised piping hot pies in 30 minutes or less, unless of course the Noid ruined everything. And fashion? Bugle Boy jeans dared to make flirtation part of the sales pitch. "Excuse me, are those Bugle Boy jeans you're wearing?" These weren't just ads. They were culture grenades, tossed into living rooms and school hallways alike. The lines were short, the wit was sharp, and by the time the jingle faded, we were all sold. Family sitcoms. Warm lighting, laughter from a laugh track, and the sound of the opening credits playing from the living room TV. It all signaled one thing: family sitcom time. In the 1980s, these shows weren't just entertainment, they were part of the household rhythm. Family Ties brought political generational gaps to life through the lovable Keaton family, where Michael J. Fox's fast-talking Alex became a cultural icon. Growing Pains showed us a family that felt real, chaotic, funny, and full of heart. Who's the Boss turned traditional roles on their heads, letting audiences see new possibilities for what family could look like. These sitcoms didn't shy away from change. They reflected a country in motion: more single parents, more working moms, more blended families finding their way. Even shows like The Facts of Life and Different Strokes offered windows into lives that looked different from our own, but still felt familiar. And in between all the jokes, there were life lessons: how to say sorry, how to stand up for yourself, how to keep a family together even when things got messy. These weren't perfect families, but maybe that's why we loved them so much. They reminded us that love, even in sitcom form, was never one size fits all. Book series. What moment could rival the quiet magic of flipping a page, legs curled on the carpet, with a world unfolding in your hands, and the smell of paperback glue drifting up with each chapter? In the 1980s, books weren't just stories, they were escapes, companions, and quiet teachers. Kids devoured titles like The Babysitter's Club, Sweet Valley High, and Choose Your Own Adventure, losing themselves in friendships, cliffhangers, and the thrill of choosing what happened next. Authors like Judy Blume and Beverly Cleary didn't write down to young readers. They wrote with them, about them, helping kids feel understood in all their awkward growing-up glory. And then, there was Book It. Pizza Hut's beloved literacy program launched in 1984, where reading wasn't just rewarding, it earned you a personal pan pizza. Suddenly, books and booths, chapters and cheese felt magically connected. It wasn't just about pizza, it was about being proud of finishing a book and having someone celebrate that with you. For many children, Book It was the first time reading felt both personal and public, a badge of honor worn in the form of a free meal and a smile. Saturday morning cartoons. Was there ever a better feeling than waking up early, knowing the only thing on your schedule was cartoons and cereal? For kids growing up in the 1980s, Saturday mornings weren't just part of the weekend, they were sacred. From about 7 a.m. to noon, major networks like NBC, ABC, and CBS turned television into a Technicolor playground. Shows like The Smurfs debuted on NBC in 1981, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and Care Bears filled the airwaves, each with its own vibrant world. catchy theme song, and life lesson tucked into 22 animated minutes. With eyes still half closed and a bowl of fruity pebbles in hand, children across the country gathered around their family TV sets, forming a kind of unspoken nationwide tradition. It wasn't just entertainment, it was a shared cultural rhythm. And while sugary cereals and toy commercials may have been part of the package, so were imagination, joy, and a sense of belonging. Even now, decades later, just hearing those theme songs is enough to send you back to a living room carpet, legs crossed, heart full. Michael Jackson's Moonwalk. Nothing on television had ever felt quite like it. On the evening of May 16, 1983, during the broadcast of Motown 25, Yesterday, Today, Forever, time seemed to hold its breath. Michael Jackson, dressed in a sequined black jacket and a single white glove, took the stage to perform Billie Jean. And then, without warning, he slid backward in a move so smooth, so impossible, it made millions of jaws drop at once. That was the night the moonwalk was born, or at least reborn. The move itself had existed in different forms before, danced by legends like Cab Calloway and James Brown. But Jackson's delivery was something else entirely. Pure showmanship. Pure magic. The next day, playgrounds and living rooms became rehearsal stages as kids across America tried to recreate that otherworldly glide. And though few got it right, no one ever forgot what it looked like. That moonwalk didn't just launch a dance, it cemented a legacy. From that moment forward, Jackson wasn't just a pop star. He was a phenomenon, a force of nature, and for many of us, a symbol of the era itself. The rise of MTV. It didn't just change music, it exploded it onto television screens in a blaze of neon, eyeliner, and sound. At exactly 12:01 a.m. on August 1st, 1981, MTV flickered to life with a prophetic declaration: "Ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll." And from that moment on, nothing in pop culture would ever be the same. For the first time, music wasn't just heard, it was seen. Suddenly, artists like Madonna, Prince, and a glitter-gloved Michael Jackson weren't just voices on the radio. They were icons with a visual language, broadcast 24/7 into America's living rooms. MTV turned music videos into performance art and launched a second British invasion, catapulting bands like Duran Duran and Eurythmics onto the charts through sheer visual impact. With its rapid-fire edits, rebellious attitude, and sense of style, MTV didn't just reflect youth culture, it invented it. And while you may have sat through half a dozen videos waiting for your favorite to come on, the ride was electric. By the mid-1980s, MTV wasn't just a channel, it was a revolution, and everyone under 30 wanted to be part of it. Toys. In the fall of 1984, toy aisles turned into battlefields, and backpacks became fortresses for warriors in disguise. Transformers stormed into American childhood with a concept that felt like pure magic. Vehicles that turned into talking robots with names, loyalties, and legends. Created through a clever mashup of Japanese toy engineering and American storytelling via Marvel Comics, these weren't just action figures. They were living narratives. Kids memorized every character's stats printed on the packaging and acted out galaxy-spanning wars between the noble Autobots and sinister Decepticons. And while Optimus Prime became a household name, he wasn't alone. Micro machines sped across kitchen floors with voiceovers faster than you could blink, and Teddy Ruxpin, with his blinking eyes and cassette-powered heart, read you stories that made bedtime feel like theater. These weren't just toys. They were invitations into fully imagined worlds. Backed by TV tie-ins and explosive commercials, they transformed childhood into something cinematic, heroic, and deeply immersive. In the 1980s, playtime wasn't passive. It was epic. Is there something we missed that instantly brings back your 80s childhood? Drop it below. Skating rink nights. Under the soft shimmer of mirrored disco balls and the gentle hum of fluorescent lights, Friday nights in the 1980s often unfolded on four wheels. Skating rinks weren't just a weekend activity. They were sanctuaries of neon dreams and teenage flutterings. The music, often a seamless mix of synth pop, early hip-hop, and slow dance ballads, wrapped around you as you floated across the floor, hand in hand with friends, or maybe just maybe, someone special. Some rinks, like Empire in Brooklyn or Flippers in LA, became cultural landmarks where movement became expression and fashion spoke louder than words. Colorful leg warmers, satin jackets, and sequin tops turned every lap into a runway, while routines were practiced like dance numbers from a musical. Skaters spun, glided, dipped, and dazzled. And even if you weren't the smoothest on wheels, the glow of the rink made everyone feel like a star. It was a time when innocence and electricity shared the same space, when community, rhythm, and style met under the same rotating light. For many, those nights still echo, like the final beat of a song you never wanted to end. Movie mania. How many summers start with a spaceship landing, a kid flying across the moon, or a scientist accidentally inventing time travel? In the 1980s, movies weren't just entertainment. They were portals into other worlds. This was the golden age of the blockbuster, when E.T., Back to the Future, and The Empire Strikes Back packed theaters with gasps and goosebumps. Directors like Spielberg and Lucas weren't just making films. They were crafting cultural events that shaped an entire generation. But the magic didn't end when the credits rolled. Thanks to the home video revolution, families brought the theater home, first with clunky VHS tapes, then with weekend rentals from Blockbuster and local mom-and-pop shops. Owning a movie, rewinding it, pausing it, memorizing every line, this changed how we watched and rewatched stories. Even the marketing was bold. Action figures, lunchboxes, and McDonald's tie-ins turned each film into an empire of its own. The silver screen didn't just glow in the dark. It lit up imaginations, rewrote pop culture, and gave the 80s one of its loudest, most unforgettable voices. Rubik's Cube and Nintendo. Bright colors, sharp corners, and endless hours of focus. If you were a kid in the early 80s, the Rubik's Cube was more than just a puzzle. It was a badge of honor. After arriving in the US in 1980, this deceptively simple-looking cube swept through classrooms and living rooms alike, inspiring everything from speed-solving contests to best-selling guides like The Simple Solution to Rubik's Cube in 1981. But mental agility wasn't the only thing getting a workout. In October 1985, the Nintendo Entertainment System brought a new kind of excitement home. With Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, and Metroid, Nintendo didn't just give us games, it gave us worlds to explore. The NES was more than a console, it was a comeback story, reviving a dying video game market after the crash of '83. And yes, if your game froze, blowing into the cartridge somehow made it work. Both the Cube and the NES challenged us in different ways, but what they had in common was clear. They sparked joy, fueled imagination, and left a mark that still lingers decades later. Atari 2600. Do you remember gripping that stiff old joystick, the rubber cover long gone, and nudging a tiny blocky spaceship across your parents' wood-paneled TV screen? In the early 1980s, the Atari 2600 wasn't just a console, it was a doorway. First released in 1977 and hitting its stride in the new decade, Atari brought the arcade experience home with titles like Space Invaders, Pitfall, and Missile Command. For many kids, this was the first time you didn't have to beg for quarters. You had a piece of the arcade plugged right into your living room. By 1982, Atari had sold millions of units, and for a while, the name Atari was practically a synonym for video games. Sure, the graphics were simple and the controls a bit clunky, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that it felt like magic, blips and beeps and blocky battles that lit up the screen in your imagination. Even when the game froze mid-round, you'd reset it, lean forward, and dive right back in. It wasn't perfect, but it was unforgettable. Mall culture and food courts. It was loud, colorful, and buzzing with life. Like someone had bottled up all the energy of the 80s and poured it into one giant air-conditioned palace. Back then, the mall wasn't just where you shopped, it was where everything happened. Teenagers swarmed the escalators, neon signs flickered above storefronts, and boom boxes echoed faintly from passing crowds. Malls like Sherman Oaks Galleria weren't just local hangouts, they were cultural landmarks, immortalized in teen movies and music videos. And right at the heart of it all was the food court. That open, echoing arena of smells and chatter offered something for everyone. A greasy slice from Sparrow, a fizzy orange Julius, maybe a styrofoam cup of teriyaki chicken from a place with too many exclamation points in its name. Kids clutched paper shopping bags and sodas, talking about the latest album or who kissed who behind the record store. Even if you didn't buy anything, the mall gave you something priceless, a place to belong. In a world before smartphones, this was where friendships were formed, trends were born, and weekends came to life. If this video brought back memories for you, give it a like and subscribe for more trips down memory lane. John Hughes Films. Have you ever watched a film and felt for the first time like someone truly understood what it meant to be young, uncertain, and quietly aching to belong? In the 1980s, John Hughes gave voice to that feeling. His films didn't rely on heroes in capes or dramatic twists. They focused on the everyday moments that defined adolescence, the awkward silences, the misunderstood crushes, the weight of not fitting in. 16 Candles captured the loneliness of invisibility. Pretty in Pink held up a mirror to class and identity. And The Breakfast Club, a film written in just 2 days, offered a single Saturday morning that unpacked an entire generation's emotional armor. Hughes had an uncanny gift for writing teenagers as they actually were, not as caricatures, but as complex, conflicted, and deeply human. His characters didn't always get happy endings, but they got honesty. They were allowed to feel messy and still matter. These weren't just high school movies. They were emotional blueprints for anyone trying to make sense of growing up. Even now, decades later, his stories resonate. Because under all the hairspray and hallway drama, Hughes reminded us, we were never alone in feeling out of place. Crafting mixtapes and Sony Walkman. A blank cassette tape once held more emotional weight than most handwritten letters. In the 1980s, crafting a mixtape was a quiet labor of love, meticulously pressing record at just the right second, lining up songs with purpose, and flipping the tape with a satisfying click when side A ran out. It was about timing, taste, and subtlety. Some mixtapes confessed teenage crushes, others were soundtracks for breakups, road trips, or sleepless nights staring at the ceiling. Every pause, every fade-out was intentional, a kind of musical punctuation that made each transition feel personal. Then came the Sony Walkman. Small, sleek, and revolutionary, it didn't just make music portable, it made it feel private. With your headphones on, you were somewhere else entirely, even while walking down your street. It was the first time many of us felt like we were starring in our own movie, with a soundtrack curated by our younger selves. In a noisy world, the mixtape and the Walkman carved out quiet space, introspective, emotional, and deeply human. You weren't just listening to music, you were archiving memories. You were declaring who you were, or who you wanted to be, one track at a time. The past lives on in memories, tucked inside the ordinary things we once took for granted. If any of these brought a smile, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss another trip down memory lane.